Hi, my name is Elizabeth Krebs, and today I will be interviewing Matt. He works in higher education as a manager of one of the dormitories at Indiana University and has been working in this field for 9 years and is 33 years old. Hi.
Hello.
Computer. Okay. First question. Do you think that the way that a person is raised can affect their gender identity?
Sure. How a person is raised and their parents' concept of what gender and gender roles are can definitely have an effect on their perception of gender and gender roles and what is acceptable for one for a given gender or another. So definitely how a person is raised will definitely affect their concept of gender and their gender identity later on in life.
All right. Do you believe that there are any gender roles that people should be taught to follow?
No. Gender. I mean, gender being completely socially constructed. It's not an actual. It's not a biological thing. It is a. It's a thing that we as people have made up. And so, are there any gender roles that people should be taught to follow? We've all defined what the gender roles are as a society and individually, and so. Are there things that they should or shouldn't follow? It's all arbitrary, essentially. At the end of the day, is that with it being a social construct, that no, there aren't any gender roles that should be like universal things or like things that people should just absolutely fall into. They should be able to choose how they identify and what they do.
I agree. All right. What do you understand is the meaning or by the word metrosexual?
It's a word that I've heard it a lot. Not so much recently. I feel like in years past, I don't feel like I've heard a lot of it recently. But I think that was kind of the first wave of gender nonconformity, especially within men or man identifying people. Um, Men that didn't conform just to like the socially constructed and socially acceptable ways of being a man of masculinity. The guys who dressed differently, acted differently, presented themselves differently. I think that's kind of the first time that it was kind of socially accepted that gender isn't a binary, but it's a shoot, what's a like a scale, like a sliding scale.
Fluid.
Yeah, gender fluidity. It's a continuum. Continuum.
Okay.
That's the word. It's a continuum, and so it's not just like one or the other. There's a lot of things in between, and I think that's kind of the first, somewhat like I guess like socially acceptable kind of gender fluidity that's come up is the metrosexual man.
A lot of people use it as a negative too.
Well,
for times describing men.
Sure. I mean that's how men cut down other men is by classifying them as not manly, and so a lot of those terms, anything that isn't exclusively masculine, if they using feminine terms to describe a man, it's like how you insult a guy, and so in negative lights, that's exactly how it's used.
Yeah. Okay, so boys and girls play with different toys. Girls normally play with dolls, boys with trucks, or superheroes or what have you. Do you think that this is because they prefer those different toys or because adults give them those toys?
It's because it's what they're given. It's because that's how the adult thinks a good little boy or good little girl should act or what they should like. I remember reading a dissertation a few years ago that said that we start learning our gender. We start getting treated differently because of our gender as of like 3 months of age. That little boys and girls are taught differently. Male and female babies are taught differently. That it's acceptable or not acceptable to cry, and how we console them. So there's nothing innate to little girls or female babies, young people being drawn to dolls and little male people being drawn to toys, to toy guns or superheroes or anything like that. It's what they're given because that's what their parents or whoever is giving them the toy think little boys and little girls
should play with.
Should have.
Yeah. Okay. To what extent do you think that the educational system tries to push people into traditionally female and male roles? In
to
school, well, I guess in schools too, because
yeah. I think that it's a relatively proven thing that how boys and girls are interacted with in traditionally masculine or feminine classes does either encourage or discourage their participation and how they are set up to succeed
Mm-hmm.
In that class. And so, I'm sorry, I'm reading the question
Oh,
again.
that's okay.
I'm a visual person. I mean, the educational system is made up of people. We are a very gender-rolled society, gender-norming society, and so teachers will consciously or unconsciously push students into different areas. How parents talk with their little boys and little girls about how they're doing in math class or science class or English class, um, encouraging them or discouraging them unconsciously or consciously along the way. But I think the educational system does. It's not even that it tries to push; it just does. Like it's not
inadvertently.
Like the system isn't set up like let's make sure all the boys go into sciences, all the girls go into education, or anything like that. But the people within the system and the way that we support students who are going through those classes looks differently based on their gender identity and how we perceive their gender to be.
Do you think the same goes for jobs?
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
people are unconsciously pushed into certain jobs based on their gender.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's nothing innate about being a preschool teacher that it should be overwhelmingly women in that role. There's nothing innate about engineering positions around the country, but that's overwhelmingly men in the situation. But it starts at a young age and plays upwards. That as you don't have as many men going into the teaching field because they're not going to that in college because they don't see it as a masculine profession. You don't have as many women going into the hard sciences because they are not encouraged to do so by either other women in the field because there are so few, or the men in the field do a poor job of diversifying and being inclusive and supporting women who are showing the talent for those areas.
All right. Why do you think there are fewer opportunities for women than men in professional sports today? Or just in general?
Why are there fewer opportunities for women than men in professional sports? Perceived prestige of the sport. When you say basketball, you kind of automatically think of the NBA and not the WNBA.
Mm-hmm.
When you think soccer, even though the female soccer team, the women's soccer team, is significantly more successful, the national team, than the men's team ever has been, the men's team is still paid more, and it's still what people prefer to watch, right or wrong.
Do you think there's a reason that people prefer to watch men over female or that's just the way it's been societally?
We're a sexist society, and we prefer to see men performing, like male athletes performing, than we do female. Yeah. Viewership is usually more heavily men watching sports, and so men watching women feels not as masculine as men watching other men perform. So I mean, we're a sexist society, and we have now and probably will always favor men over women, regardless of if women are doing significantly better in the thing that they are competing in. That is just who we are, unfortunately.
Yeah. Would you personally rather work for a male or a female boss, if given the choice?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for men and women in the past. Again, there's nothing specific about like, oh, you're a woman, you're a lesser boss, or a man, and you're a better boss, or anything like that. I've had crummy bosses of all kinds of genders.
So you really don't have a preference?
Usually, honestly, I usually would prefer to work with a female or a woman as a boss. It gives me a different perspective on things, so that my messaging or my thought processes are not just one-sided or just a masculine perception or thought process or action that I'm taking. That it can be a different worldview that's presented, a distinctly different worldview that's presented. So if I had the choice, I usually would choose female um, supervisors. I've enjoyed the ones that I have had that were good. I've had bad ones too. Um, but if given a choice, just for inclusiveness and decision making and the effect of the decisions that we have on our people, our constituencies, our students around us, try to get as diverse a perspective as possible. So,
Female.
female.
All right.
Woman.
In what aspects of life do you think that it's easier to be a woman?
What
Or
aspects
do
of life
you?
is it easier to be a woman? I mean, my cynical side wants to say none. I mean, we're a patriarchal society built on male, masculine privilege and masculine identity being the dominant one, and where the power lies. When you look at any kind of organizational setup or government or anything like that is overwhelmingly men.
Mm-hmm.
So, in what aspect of life is it easier being a woman? I mean, it sounds bad, but the honest truth, like if we're being honest about it, like there's a reason that women and femininity are the minoritized identities in our countries, because it is not advantageous to be a woman.
Well, then for what aspects is it easier to be a man? I mean, don't besides all, obviously.
Yeah, I mean the very
like if you look at like jobs,
gendered, like the very gendered job roles are very traditional, like gender roles out there. It's easier to be a preschool teacher to be a woman than it is to be a man. Men are seen as, if they are in that role, can be perceived either as another minoritized identity or community, or like a pedophile. Like men wanting to be around children is perceived as so socially unacceptable.
Which is crazy.
Right, like there must be something wrong with them. So, aspects, certain like moments that there's always moments where a person's individual identity can be an advantage or disadvantage, but from a societal standpoint, men and masculinity are the privileged identity, and they are the ones in the power.
Right.
And women are, well, and they pretty much always have been, and with significant work, again, like not being negative about it, but like we have to, right, like we have to acknowledge where we are first, and the dominance of masculinity and toxic masculinity, and how that shaped our society and where we are. Like that's it is more advantageous to be a man than it is to be a woman.
That is true. All right. Do you think that there's a difference between friendships between like a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman? So like how is a relationship between a man and a woman, a friendship, different from the friendship between two guys or the friendship between two women?
I think that in inter-men relationships, we actually just did an activity like this a couple of months ago as part of a departmental kind of learning initiative, and we talked about we did a caucus of out of our group. We just took all the men out of it and took all the non-men. We were doing like privileged and minoritized identities, and we were talking about like what it is to be a man, and how interconnected masculinity and sexual identity are. For men, there's a constant, wanting to be as masculine as you can be, approach to things, and so
competition between two men's friends.
Yeah, I mean, there's the rise of the saying, no homo, because we don't want like, I love you, man, no homo.
I've never heard that.
Oh yeah. No, that's a really common. Yeah, it's a super common. Less so now. I feel like I haven't heard it quite as much lately, but there was a bit like 4 or 5 years, but it was like a super big thing. Yeah, like that I can express an emotion, but it's not gay. Like, don't worry, it's not gay. Okay. Like, it's cool. It's not gay. There's the man tap when we hug. when we hug each other, like we'll put our hand around, and then you'll do like the back slap. And
But you don't do that with your girlfriends.
Well, but
friends who are women.
But what I've been told is that signifies like not gay.
Oh.
Like, or we're not gay,
like
or something.
Okay.
Like, yeah, like it has to be like a combative, like physical thing thrown into a otherwise like intimate exchange.
Huh.
And
That's interesting.
Yeah. So the difference in friendships between a man and a woman versus man and man, I don't feel quite as qualified to talk about woman and woman as much. Not in a woman and woman friendship of any kind.
That would be true.
But that that there are like some different norms and socially accepted ways of interacting and language that's used and interactions and things like that. So I think that we are kind of constantly assessing within men, like is what you're doing masculine? Is it manly enough? The concept of like I'm taking your man card for not being like masculine enough, or one of the guys in our group talked about that he would assign points. Like it is mine, but like if somebody did something that was not like a traditionally masculine thing to do, like you lose points, and that would affect like his perception of them. And this is somewhat when we're younger, but it's also like a concept like that's how we were raised thinking within our social groups as children, and so it's hard to get out of the mindset of it. So some part of it's always going to be there, just being able to acknowledge it and not let it overly affect you. But definitely about how we I'm more aware that I am a man with other men than I am a man when I'm with another woman. Like I think more about my masculinity with other men and in relation to and to a certain degree trying to appear like credible or equally masculine to them. I don't think about or worry about that in any way when I'm with women, because I know that I'm like the majority. I'm
you are the masculine.
Right. I'm the identity and power, and so therefore my how I interact looks different.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. All right, and last question: if you have children, since I know you don't, how do you think that boys and girls should be treated differently, or should they be treated differently? So your son or your daughter?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should be treated the same in that they should be given the same opportunities and chances to express themselves in the way that feels most authentically them. That if you go to the toy store and run up and down the aisle, if the little boy comes back with a pink doll, like, okay, like if that's what you're drawn to, like go for it, dude. See, gender language towards the child that doesn't even know his own gender identity. Go for it, little one.
What about like the whole daddy's little girl or be a tough guy or?
Well, I mean that all kind of plays into it, but there's also has to be an acknowledgement of like the experience of little boys and little girls is fundamentally different in our society, and so you have to actively counteract that. The messages that little girls are getting about body image or their place in the world, images that little boys are getting about what it is to be a man. Like you have to be constantly, I think, consciously, consistently counteracting those things that you can see. So in how they express themselves should be left up to them, but then how do you treat little boys and little girls differently is that you have to actively see the messages that are being sent to them, think about how they are internalizing either upholding gender roles or upholding toxic masculinity or whatever it is, and actively work to educate and counteract those things. And so it's like you have to treat them differently because they're having different like to try to treat them the same is be like everyone's got the same opportunity and experience in society, and that's just a lie. So treating them differently to the extent that kind of what they are experiencing, and working to make them better people than the society's trying to make them into.
Ooh, that was good. I like that. All right, and that's it. Thank you very much.